Imagine walking out of your front door, taking 3 steps across your street, and entering a different country. No passport, no checkpoint, no fence. Just a line painted on the road. That's not a hypothetical. That's Tuesday morning for thousands of people living in towns that were accidentally sliced in half by international borders. And some of these places are so absurd, so legally complicated, so genuinely bizarre, that governments have spent decades arguing about who owns a single house. Here's what nobody tells you about borders. They're not natural. They don't follow mountains or rivers or logic. They follow the decisions of people who were usually far away, usually in a hurry, and very often wrong. And the people left living on top of those decisions just had to figure it out. This is every town split between 2 countries, and they get stranger as we go. Number 1. Darby Line, Vermont/Stansted, Canada. We start in a small, quiet town on the US-Canada border called Darby Line. Population just over 2,000. One main street. A library, a post office. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone and nothing much happens. Except the border runs directly through the middle of all of it. The Haskell Free Library and Opera House sits right on the boundary line. The front door is in the United States. The books are in Canada. When you walk in to borrow something, you've technically entered a foreign country without declaring anything. For most of its history, nobody cared. Families lived on both sides. Kids crossed the road for school. Neighbors borrowed sugar across an invisible line that existed on a map, but not in real life. The border was a technicality. Everyone ignored it. Then 9/11 happened. Suddenly, the US government decided that a painted line on a library floor wasn't quite enough border security. They installed surveillance cameras, added legal restrictions on crossing, made it illegal to visit your neighbor without first driving to an official crossing point, sometimes 20 minutes out of your way, just to cross what is effectively your own street. The border didn't move. The rules around it did. And they changed everything. Today, there are streets where the north side is Canadian and the south side is American. Residents can see their neighbors from their front windows, wave at them, call them on the phone. But physically visiting requires a detour that can take the better part of an hour. A community that spent a century ignoring a line on a map is now legally defined by it. Not because the geography changed, because the politics did. Number 2. Baarle, Netherlands/Belgium. If Darby Line is awkward, Baarle is completely unhinged. Baarle is a town split not between 2 halves, but into 30 separate pieces, scattered across the Netherlands and Belgium. Like someone dropped a jigsaw puzzle, stepped on it, and walked away. There are Belgian enclaves inside Dutch territory. Dutch enclaves inside Belgian enclaves inside Dutch territory. One plot of land is technically a Dutch enclave inside a Belgian enclave inside the Netherlands. A Russian doll of national sovereignty sitting in the middle of a residential street. At one point, a single house had its front door in Belgium and its back garden in the Netherlands. Under local law, your nationality was determined by which country your front door opened into. So the owner simply moved his front door 6 inches to pay lower Belgian taxes. Completely legal, perfectly logical, absolutely absurd. This situation exists because of a medieval land deal from the 1100s that was never properly resolved. Lords traded pieces of territory, granted patches of land as dowries, swapped fields in exchange for military favors, and nobody ever sat down to draw a clean final map. Every transaction added another layer of complexity that the next generation inherited and passed on. The result, 900 years later, is a town where the nationality of your house changes mid-street, where a restaurant can have tables in 2 different countries and you choose which legal system you're sitting under when you order your food, where the police from 2 nations share jurisdiction over a single crossroads and have a quiet, long-standing gentleman's agreement about who handles what. It functions. It has always functioned, just barely, and only because the Dutch and the Belgians are extraordinarily patient people who have collectively decided that the alternative, actually resolving 9 centuries of land disputes, sounds significantly worse. Number 3. llivia, Spain, inside France. In 1659, France and Spain signed the Treaty of the Pyrenees, formally ending a long and expensive war over control of southern Europe. As part of the settlement, Spain agreed to hand over 33 villages in the mountain region of Cerdagne to France. Straightforward enough. Except there was one problem. llivia wasn't a village. llivia was a town. Population around 1,500. Established municipality. Official civic status dating back centuries. The Spanish negotiators pointed at the treaty, pointed at llivia, and said, with remarkable composure, that the agreement specified villages, and this was categorically not one of those. France, furious, had no legal argument. Spain kept it. The result is a piece of Spain sitting entirely inside French territory. Spanish police, Spanish laws, Spanish postboxes, Spanish road signs, a sovereign island in a French sea connected to the rest of Spain by a 6-kilometer neutral road that both governments agreed to share. Llivia has leaned into this ever since. There are signs on the road reminding you that you are entering Spain. The locals will tell you the full story of the treaty with the kind of deep satisfaction that only comes from outsmarting a neighboring superpower on a technicality in 1659 and still benefiting from it today. The town is older than the border that surrounds it, and it plans to stay that way. Number 4. Divided towns under apartheid, South Africa. Not all split towns come from medieval treaties or careless colonial surveying. Some come from something far more deliberate and far darker. Under apartheid, the South African government created a system of so-called homelands, artificially constructed territories where black South Africans were forced to live, stripped of their South African citizenship while still inside their own country. The borders of these homelands were not drawn by geography. They were drawn by ideology, designed to fragment black communities, separate families, and create a system of internal borders that served no purpose except control. One homeland called Bophuthatswana existed in 19 completely separate non-contiguous pieces scattered across the country. A resident could be driving down a local road, cross an invisible line, and find themselves technically in a different country, one with different laws, different ID documents, and no political rights in either direction. These weren't administrative accidents, they were engineered. The fractured geography was the policy. Splitting communities across invented borders made organizing harder, movement more restricted, identity more confused. The border was not a side effect of governance, the border was the instrument of it. When apartheid ended in 1994, the homelands were legally dissolved, but the roads built to divide still run the same way. The infrastructure of separation outlasted the law that created it. In some places, those invisible lines still shape how towns connect, or don't, to this day. Number 5. Merket Island, Finland/Sweden. Our final entry is the most quietly ridiculous. Merket is a small, flat, featureless rock sitting in the Baltic Sea. It is roughly the size of a large city block. Nothing grows on it. Virtually nothing lives on it. It has no strategic value, no natural resources, and no particular reason to exist in international conversations at all. It is split between Finland and Sweden. The original border was drawn in 1809 and ran in a straight line directly through the middle of the island. Fine, logical even, given there was nothing there. Then in 1885, Sweden built a lighthouse on their half of the rock. Useful, necessary. Except the construction was slightly off, and part of the lighthouse structure crossed the borderline onto the Finnish side. The lighthouse keeper, doing his rounds, technically entered Finnish territory to do his job. For nearly 100 years, this was quietly ignored. Then in 1985, Finland and Sweden sat down and formally renegotiated the border of a single uninhabited rock in the Baltic Sea. Not to give one country more land. Both sides were legally entitled to exactly the same total area as before, but to draw the line in a shape that gave Sweden clean access to their own lighthouse. The new border is a jagged Z shape that looks like it was sketched by someone who had never seen a map before. It is possibly the most effort two countries have ever put into solving a problem that affected, at maximum, one lighthouse keeper. Here's the thing that connects all 5 of these places. None of these borders were drawn for the people living on top of them. They were drawn by treaty negotiators who'd never visited, by medieval lords trading land like chess pieces, by apartheid architects trying to fracture communities, by surveyors who miscalculated by 6 inches and created a century of paperwork. The people came after, or they were already there and the line arrived around them without warning. And yet somehow, in Derby Line, in Baarle, in llivia, people adapted. They moved front doors for tax advantages. They drove 20 minutes to visit their neighbors. They built libraries that belonged to 2 countries and somehow managed to keep both sides stocked with books. Borders look permanent on a map. On the ground, they are almost always a negotiation between governments, between neighbors, between history and whoever is currently living inside it. There are hundreds more places like these, each one stranger than the last. Subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.